So we're going to continue with the next part of our program here this morning before we break for lunch. This next session, if I push the right button, is brought to us by Cargill Marketsense. We're really happy to have a lot of the Cargill team here with us in Guelph this year, and they were with us in Canmore last year, and we've grown very fond of our relationship together. So very much appreciate your support. And we have back again for the second year in a row, Ed Broschinski with us. So Ed is going to talk today about the OODA Loop. I'm not even going to tell you what that means because Ed's going to go into it. How to cut out the noise and make better decisions for your farm. So a little bit about Ed. Oh, there you are. I always look to see, like, are they up here or are they in the washroom? So Ed's right here. So Ed was raised in rural Ontario and learned the value of hard work at a young age in the dairy barn and tobacco fields. Also, I'm Southwestern Ontario too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Ed moved to Western Canada in 2005, and spent 10 years working in the energy industry. Ed started with Cargill as a grain buyer and became an advisor in 2017. He has written research papers on optimizing economic regulation and forecasting commodity prices based on inventory levels. He lives currently with his partner Lisa and family in Battleford, Saskatchewan, and apparently he's quite the rock and roller. So please put your hands together to welcome Ed.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Everything, all the audio visual is working good? Perfect. I don't have to use my singing voice. I can just speak to you like a normal human being. Thanks for the time in front of you today. Consultants, you know, we have sometimes brimming, we're bursting with knowledge and good advice, but a really good consultant is a good listener. So most of the time, we have to be good listeners. But when I get 45 minutes to talk to you uninterrupted, I'm going to take it, and that's today. Okay, so we're going to talk about the OODA Loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It's a rational decision-making framework to help you cut out the noise and make better decisions. How is this presentation going to go? We're going to talk about how do we make decisions now. It might not be the OODA Loop everybody is using. It might be something else. Then I'm going to give you a real-life story about how I didn't use the OODA Loop, and I lost a lot of money, but gained some experience and some good times. Everybody likes stories where they lose a lot of money, right? Nobody wants to hear about success. I'm going to give you a real exciting, I really messed up story, and you're going to love it. Then we're going to go into the structure of the OODA Loop and the history. We're going to then go into another real-life story of when I successfully this time used the OODA Loop in a health emergency. And then finally, how are we applying it at Marketsense with farmers successfully? Okay, so how do we make decisions? How do we make decisions? We as in human species. Show of hands, who brushed their teeth today? Really good, really good, really good. I'm proud of you. Now, how did you, somebody that brushed their teeth, how did you make that decision to brush your teeth this morning? Teeth felt a little dirty. Anybody else? Habit. Oh, that's what I was hoping somebody would say. It's a habit. Is there a prize? I think we can find you a prize. Yeah, we'll find you a prize. How do we make decisions? Habit. We brush our teeth through habit. You know what we don't do is we don't sit there and say, oh, well, you know, I don't want to get cavities. That's one of my goals. My doctor said I should brush my teeth every day, and today's a day, so I should brush it. I should put batteries in my electric toothbrush that's brand new. It's great. And I'll run through a cost-benefit analysis of brushing my teeth this morning. We don't do that. Maybe we did it once. That's a good habit. Now, there's bad habits too, right? Sometimes we do things that don't make any sense just because it's a habit. Daylight savings time. I am a heretic. Daylight savings time heretic. It's scientifically proven that daylight savings time causes lots of societal disruption and increases traffic accidents. Yet, in Alberta, 50.2% of people in Alberta voted a majority to keep daylight savings time in 2021. That's the power of tradition. Another decision-making framework that we use is intuition. Go with your gut. Another way to put that is heuristics, or those are called mental shortcuts. Things that we do to kind of make decisions without full information. One of them, a good one in my opinion, is that buying bulk is better. Go to the store, you can buy 10,000 rolls of toilet paper at a much cheaper price than 100. That's usually a good decision to make. It's not always the case, but it's a good, profitable shortcut. Emotions can play a big role in that, though. You got to be careful with going with your gut, because it's really about how you feel in that moment. Oh, I felt so good this morning. I tipped my waitress $200. Oh, geez, wow, that's a lot of money. How much was the coffee? It was $2. Well, that wasn't really rational, but that was emotional. It felt good. That's okay. It's a fine decision to make. It's not necessarily rational, and it's very emotional based. Then we get to a more structural kind of decision-making framework, and it's a values-based. Now, this one works really well for a lot of people, works well for me. I see $50 on the ground. I say, you know what? That's somebody else's money. I didn't earn that $50. I'm going to return it. I'm going to maybe hand it into the front desk or something like that and give somebody else that money back. It's not mine to take. When I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7, I went to the store with my parents. I took $10 out of my piggy bank, and I bought some micro machines. There's these little military figures. So happy. Oh, my own toy, my own allowance. I'm buying my own things. Went to the choo-choo train in the store and set my bag down and went home, had my little ride, 30 seconds, and that was gone. Oh, I was so devastated. I was devastated. So I talked to my parents. I was crying. We called the store, and lo and behold, some good Samaritan who was operating with a values-based decision-making framework had turned in my micro machines, and to this day, I thank that person. If it was one of you, thank you, because it's made me a better person. It's made me a better person today. That's a values-based decision-making framework, an ideological framework that sometimes can be too rigid. You have to be careful. So there has been times, and a very, very high-profile example is the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? The rigid, ideological commitment to a communist utopian society was not able to stand up against the changing world, and that society collapsed in the late 1980s. That rigid ideological framework wasn't successful in that case. And then finally, the rational decision-making model. You guys are going to love this one. I used a rational decision-making model recently. I went to my wife, and I can't even remember what the disagreement was. And, I presented her with a rational argument. I had supporting evidence. And, I think I won the argument. And where did that get me? Well, the next day I brought home flowers, and I was begging for forgiveness. The flowers, you can't eat them. They're going to die right away. It's not rational to buy flowers, but it was an emotional decision I made, and it was the right decision. I guarantee you. But in any case, we're going to talk about rational decision-making model today. These other decision-making models that I just talked about do happen. We use them in farming. Ritualized traditional response. I sell in July every year. Who here sells grain in July? Oh, hey, you guys are using a rational decision-making model. That's great. But in any case, that happens a lot, and oftentimes there's a drought or there's some weather scare in July, and the price goes higher, and that works, okay? That's a habit or tradition. Intuition, go with your gut. Sometimes this is where in grain marketing we can really get tripped up, because the fear part takes over when the market might be going down, and fear is proven to cause blood flow to come away from your central cortex, the part of your brain that is responsible for rational decision making, and it puts that blood into parts of your body that are responsible for fight or flight response. So literally, when you're marketing grain in a fearful state, you are impaired. Your brain is impaired. And that's why oftentimes we make really bad decisions when we're marketing in fear. Beliefs and values to make a grain marketing decision on the farm. I don't sell to this, I don't do business with this company because they messed with my grandfather one time, or one time they were dishonest. Or another way to look at that is I do always do business with this company because they've always treated me fairly. They don't always have to have the highest price, but I know that when I go there I'm getting a good, fair treatment. That's a values-based. My values bring me to do business with that company. And then finally, farmers, we can use the OODA Loop that I'm going to show you today to make decisions. So those are other decision-making frameworks. We're going to use the OODA Loop today, and I'm going to present that to you. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a story about how important this OODA Loop can be. That's me there. Actually, it's not me. But that's who I thought I was in school, learning about commodity economics, and specifically energy, crude oil. And I thought, I've got an edge. I'm in school, I'm smart. I've got these charts. I'm going to make a lot of money if I trade these crude oil spreads. So I started trading. And I put a position on in the morning. Click in, right? Oh, good, it's going my way. Add a little bit more. Yeah, it's going my way. Got some good feedback. Oh, I'm making some more money, feeling good, right? The euphoria is kicking in. Oh, I'm going to make some more money, right? Oh, it's going against me. Ah! Right, get out. What a relief. That was good execution, Ed. You're a smart trader. Oh no, it's going back up again. I better get back in. All in. All in. I'm going to make money. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up, and then bang, down. Ah, down again. No, I'm not going to get out. Bang, down again. Bang, bang, I'm red. Oh no, my trading account's gone. I'm actually in the red. Now I have to put more money in than was even in there before. And that guy turned into this guy. That's who I really was in school. So anyway, it was embarrassing, right? I tell that story now. Enough time has gone by that I can tell it without crying. A couple things I failed to do in a rational decision-making model that I'm going to present to you. I failed to observe a very important thing, that the WTI crude oil contract settles between 2:28 and 2:30 p.m. And in those 2 minutes, you do not want to be trading a 1-second crude oil chart, because you'll get cleaned out by traders who are adjusting their positions. Didn't pay attention to the clock. I was making money. I also failed to observe that the market was actually in a long-term uptrend. So I was trading a product that actually made money on the upside when the crude oil market was falling. And I was thinking that the market was going to keep falling, and it wasn't. It was in a long-term uptrend. So I failed to kind of observe the reality of the environment that I was in over the long term. I failed to orient, too. One of my core goals, why was I at school? I wanted to get my degree, learn something. To get my degree, I needed to pass an exam. To pass an exam, I needed to study. To study, I needed to not be distracted by trading crude oil and losing my student loan money, which was borrowed from the taxpayer. Thank you very much. I needed more, though, because I lost it all. And how am I going to get a degree and become a successful individual if I lose all my money and I have to quit school? And so I failed to orient my own personal kind of position for the decisions I was making. That was a failure to be rational. So the OODA Loop. Enter the OODA Loop. This is before OODA Loop, Ed. This is enter OODA Loop. So it has a military origin. It was developed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John 42nd Boyd in the 1970s. 42nd Boyd because he boasted that he could eliminate any enemy in 40 seconds or less following the OODA Loop decision-making process. And he was successful. What he found in his research was that U.S. Air Force pilots flying F-86s were shooting down Korean MiG-15s in the Korean War at a 10-to-1 ratio. And the MiG-15 at that time was the best fighter jet in the world. It was superior in speed, in altitude, and in cornering. All reasonable people would say that the MiG-15 would win the dogfights, but they weren't. Why were the U.S. pilots winning the dogfights? Well, the U.S. Air Force pilots could better observe. They had a better bubble canopy, so they had better peripheral vision, and they could look behind them. Whereas the MiG-18 or the MiG-15s had an enclosed cockpit, and they had a bunch of bars and things in their way. They couldn't observe as well. U.S. pilots could also orient better. They had a hydraulic system that allowed them to be more maneuverable. And what this allowed them to do is get a better vantage point to observe and orient their plane relative to the external environment, the enemy planes. And this allowed them to make better decisions. And those better decisions then led to wins, combat wins, very tangible, measurable combat wins. And John 42nd Boyd said it was the observation and the orientation that mattered, not the technological superiority of the MiG fighter jet. So he developed this very nice, kind of complex framework for making decisions in the military context. Now, if you're spending time and you really want to kind of dig deep into the OODA Loop, spend some real time, maybe 4 or 5 days, not 45 minutes, then we can go through this. But financial professionals love to simplify things. We love to break it down to the basics, right? So we got the top: observe, orient. I keep pointing at these slides because I see them, right? But you see them: observe, orient, decide, act. This is the simplified OODA Loop that the financial sector has kind of taken over and that we use today. And I think it's something that you can use right after you leave this presentation to make your next decision. Unless it's talking to your wife, don't. Okay, so what is the OODA Loop? Observe. So the first thing when you're presented with any kind of potential decision is to take stock of the current situation, including the internal and, most importantly, external drivers of change. You know, fairly self-explanatory. You're gathering information, you're observing the world around you. Then you're going to contextualize those observations with respect to your goals. This is where things get important, right? Don't worry about the external environment. You've already taken your observations. Now it's about where do you fit? I'll give you an example. Right now, if you really want to make a lot of money in commodities, you should trade orange juice. Yeah, it's making all-time new highs. There's some diseases in Florida, I guess, on the trees. Big money in orange juice, people. How does that fit on your farm? How does that fit into your goals? It doesn't, really. I mean, you can't grow oranges in Ontario. I mean, maybe somebody will try. It's not going to work. So that's how you, there may be an opportunity in orange juice, but it doesn't necessarily fit into the context of your life and your operation. Doesn't work. Then the decision part, and that is, okay, well, we've got the observation. We've determined that there's an opportunity that's relevant to me and my operation, or you and your operation. Now we have to choose a path forward. And I'll show you how we do that as well. And then distinct from the decision is the action. And that is distinct because how often do we go through, oh, we've found this opportunity. It's a great opportunity. We're going to do something. We're going to do this. Maybe after lunch. Oh, maybe tomorrow. Yeah, we'll do it after seeding. Well, maybe next year we'll do it. Yeah, no, the action is pretty important. And that sometimes really trips us up. So that's why these are distinct pieces of the rational decision-making framework. Now, there are some criticisms. Anytime anybody presents you with an idea, you should criticize it. And not necessarily because you disagree, but because it needs to stand up to criticism, right? So, you know, there are some very real criticisms of the OODA Loop that I've run across. One of them is that it's too obvious. I mean, that's real. Yeah, of course. You're going to look around you, see what's happening. You're going to see if it makes sense to you, and then you're going to do something about it. Yeah, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. Pretty simple, right? But it's not that obvious. How often do we skip steps? How often do we go straight from observing something, ooh, that chocolate is 3 for 1, and I'm going to buy them. And you come home and you've got all these chocolate bars and you're sick to your stomach because you just ate 3 chocolate bars. Like, why did I do that? I didn't do any kind of analysis of the situation here. How often do we skip those critical decision-making steps and we just go straight from observation to action? So it's not obvious. It's developed by the military. That's a criticism too. It's too focused on having an opponent, and sometimes as you kind of go deeper into the OODA Loop process, you find that it really is about fighting somebody else, like literally, or especially in business, sometimes combating an organizational opponent, some competitor to the industry. But I think even though as farmers and as people in the agriculture industry, it's very sometimes independent, sometimes we are our own worst enemy. I think to Kelly Dobson's presentation that we took in earlier today at one of the seminars, and he said there's this latent advisor in each one of your brains, and it's there in your central cortex. And unlocking that is the key, because it's the reptile brain that takes over most of the time, right? Those gut instincts. And sometimes it's so hard and it suppresses our rational decision-making framework. How often are we actually our own worst enemy? This is a very real risk, right? Risk of self-reinforcing loops. Because every time that you go through this decision-making process, it loops back to the next decision, right? How did I perform in this latest decision? What's the next decision? And sometimes you make a bad decision that you get lucky on. I ran a red light. I saved 5 minutes. That was a good decision. I'm going to do that again. Maybe I do it again and I get away with it until it ends in a catastrophe. So how do you make sure that your decision-making loop is robust to negative loops? You have to expose it to criticism, outside criticism and input from an advisor or a close partner. Change of scenario. Driving with my wife this time. Hey, I ran that red light yesterday. It worked really good. I'm going to do it again. What? No, you're not. No, it worked really good last time. I got a good result. No. I got clued in real quick. So open your mental model to other stakeholders. Now, you'll recognize the theme. My wife is a very influential person in my life, and she influences everything I do. There's a more serious story that I'm going to share with you now, and it's definitely had a very big impact on me. There was, about 2 years ago, my wife got very sick, and we weren't sure what was going on. She would get up, and then she would be fine, and then she'd go back kind of into this really tired and not really making sense kind of sickness. And one morning I was at work, I was working at my desk, and she called down to me and she said, "Ed, I can't move my arm." So I went upstairs, and sure enough, she had her kind of sweater halfway over her head, and her arm was just limp on her side. And I thought, and I picked it up, and it was just like a spaghetti. I thought, instantly panic, right? Just washes over me. Oh, what if she might die? And we have 2 kids. Like, what am I going to do? And I just started panicking. Heart started beating. Face started going red. Ears started ringing. Remember that? That was me. And for some reason, and I don't really know why, and maybe it was divine intervention, I don't know, but calm washed over me, and I was able to start thinking rationally again. And I said, okay, we have to go to the hospital. But you can't go to the hospital, you have to have a shirt on first. So first thing you're going to do is I'm right next to you, and you have a shirt on, so we're going to pull that over your head and put your arm through. And then the second step to going to the hospital is the car is outside, the keys are over on the counter, and neither of us have shoes on. And so to do that, I'm going to have to go down the stairs. I'm going to have to get your shoes and my shoes. I'm going to come over and I'm going to put them on, Then I'm going to go over to the counter, get the keys for the car, put them in my pocket. Then I'm going to pick you up, because you can't walk. The whole left side was jello. And we're going to walk over to the car, and we're going to go to the hospital. We're going to execute that. Because can you imagine if I panicked, oh, we got to get you to the hospital, I'll throw you over my back and go down the stairs, oh, I need my keys, or go and get the keys. You know, it could be a disaster. The stairs in the middle here, it's icy outside, it's cold. She's not wearing proper clothes. Somehow that rational decision-making model, and maybe it was because I was studying the OODA Loop at the time, took over and allowed me to make a good decision. Driving to the hospital, going slow rather than panicking, going 150. The rational decision-making model can save a life. I don't know if it saved her life that day, but she's doing fine. She's pregnant with our third child, due on January 11th, and she learned how to cut hair again. Like her arm was useless. It was a stroke, and so she was able to get back that muscle memory again and learn. And she owns a hair salon. She's a successful businesswoman. A rational decision-making model, the OODA Loop, I believe, helped us through that situation and allowed me not to panic. So, with that said, let's talk about how Marketsense, how the organization that I'm part of, is using it to help farmers today. And this is something in the oilseeds market that we're experiencing right now today. If you've got soybeans that you've got to market, canola, and the other oilseed, this is what we're doing today. This is an example of how, of a slide that I'm using in some of my presentation to clients right now. Okay, oilseeds market. Is it, show of hands, is anybody aware of the weather in Brazil? Is anybody, like, why do I know so much about the daily weather patterns in Brazil, right? Well, it's because it matters to our positioning, right? It matters in the context of what we do on farm with soybeans and oilseeds. It matters what's going on in Brazil, the weather. So we observe the headlines. Dry in Brazil. We observe correlated markets. Prices in Brazil. Prices of soybeans in China. Prices of soybeans in the United States. We observe the yields. In this case, I've got canola up there, but our local yields, right? How's the local market performing? How's the local crush demand performing, unrelated to Brazil? Is there anything there that we need to observe? Other harvests, technical trends, macro markets, interest rates. These are all the observations that we take in, right? All the information that you'll need to gather before orienting yourself. Okay, so based on all this information, is there a story here? Well, where's my sales percentage? It's going to be very different how you respond if you're 100% sold and you think the market's going to go higher because of Brazil versus only being 20% sold and normally you're 50% at this time of year. Very different, because if you're 100% sold, you might want to buy back into the market, right? You might want to take some risk back on, get unsold. Whereas if you're only 20% sold, you might want to be looking at an opportunity to sell the grain. Very different response, but to the same market conditions. Orienting yourself to non-price constraints. What if the price doesn't matter? I got a bill to pay on December 31st. Storage risk. I got a bin that's starting to get hot. I don't care what the price is. I got to get it moved. Other stakeholders. My grandmother relies on the grain sales instead of a monthly pension. Doesn't really matter what the price is. Got to get those sold. Doesn't matter what the weather is in Brazil. She doesn't care. She's got to eat. She needs new teeth. Emotional state. Are you distracted? I can't tell you how many times I've made a call to a client and they're like, oh yeah, an opportunity is sweet. Just let me wipe off the oil. I'm underneath the tractor and something just blew up. But yeah, like let's get decision making here. I got to take advantage of this opportunity. I say, no, stop. I'll call you back in an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe tomorrow morning. Get it done, because if you make a decision right now, I don't care what the opportunity is. There's a really good probability that you're going to make either a bad decision in the market or you're going to make a bad decision fixing your tractor, and that's going to be even worse. Emotional state is the orientation and past experience. Maybe we've done this before. Maybe we've seen a Brazilian weather story before. How did we execute? Was there something we wish we did better? Because here's an opportunity to maybe make those changes. How did we react in the past? Can we be successful with the same framework as before? That's your orientation. And notice all of the orientation pieces did not, there was no market element there. Right? It was all about your own personal situation, your orientation, the context. Decide. So now you've identified that there's something to do. Now you got to decide how you're going to actually take advantage of that opportunity. At Marketsense, we use a 5-point approach, and this has been very successful. You've decided that, okay, there's something I need to do. What is my goal in this decision? Relative to that goal, what would success look like? How would a successful operation look versus what would failure look like relative to that goal? Now you've got some boundaries around the decision-making process. How much am I willing to risk to achieve that goal? And if it doesn't go my way, what's our plan B? What's our exit strategy? That's the decision part of the OODA Loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. Again, this one always trips us up. When are we going to act? Right now? After lunch? Tomorrow? The next day? Next year? So often that one trips us up. You got to say when. When are we going to do it? Who is going to act? Is it me as the consultant? Is the farmer have to make a call? Do we have to bring somebody else in, a sales representative somewhere? Do we have to call a different stakeholder, somebody with check signing authority? And how are we going to act? This is another one that really messes us up. Are you going to send a text, a phone call, an email? Are you going to go in, look them face to face, shake their hand, and sign some papers? Or do you have to call a truck driver to pick up grain? The act, don't underestimate that. That one can really trip us up. So this is an example of how we are using, and we used this last week, we used it the week before, and our advisors are following this protocol to make decisions in the oilseeds market, and we're doing it successfully. I was wondering about this quote. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. We have a powerful central cortex. It's like a bolt-on supercharger to a 1987 Caprice Classic. It's an old frame, right? And we bolted on this wonderful. And Kelly Dobson told me about this too. He's like, this is a new feature in our brains that we're not really good at using. This central cortex that we have. And when we let it run wild, I overthought this thing. I just, my thoughts were running wild. My brain was wandering wild. That can be more dangerous to you than anything else, than your own worst enemy. That's what Buddha said. Something Buddha also said, the same quote, he said, a proper framework, he didn't use that exact word, but he said a proper framework, a proper way of thinking is more valuable to you and supportive to you than your own mother or father. Again, I go back to Kelly Dobson's presentation that I watched yesterday. And he said, yeah, there's that latent advisor in all of us. And just listening to that voice of reason is the hard part, right? Is developing a structure, a rational structure, and in this case, it's the OODA Loop that I'm presenting to you to help you unlock the power of that rational decision-making central nervous system called the central or cerebral cortex. So we're not going to get too biological on you, but I will say I'm presenting this to you today because we've had success with it. At Marketsense, it's part of our core ideology. We provide our community of farmers with grain marketing expertise. So that's the observation part. Perspective and discipline, that's the context, that's the orientation part. It's part of our core ideology. The perspective and the discipline, orienting our farmers with respect to the information. We create then confidence in their decision making. So that is the decision making part of the OODA Loop. to give you confidence that the decision you're making is well-reasoned, and then finally bringing those plans to life. All the talk, all the thinking, then the acting. The action part is what we help. And we believe, and we've seen success this way, because we've seen people move towards our core ideology of improving farmers' lives and securing the farmer the future of their farm business. So you don't need to be on Marketsense to follow the OODA Loop, though. I didn't need to. I wasn't working for Cargill when I was losing money trading crude oil. That's a good thing. But I'm telling you, we've seen success in our organization, and so I'm offering you this decision-making framework today. I'm offering this to you with the experiences that we've derived at Marketsense, and I hope that when you leave here today, you can use this framework, observe, orient, decide, and act to cut out the noise and make better decisions in your life and on your farm. Thanks for listening to my stories today. Thank you for your attentiveness and allowing me to speak to you for 45 minutes. Like I said, it's a great privilege. Now, I'd like to take some questions. And we've got some time for that? Great, yeah. Thank you. There is so much information out there to observe. How do you know how much information to make a good decision? You know what? It's not actually about how much information, because there's an infinite amount, and we always get this issue where it's analysis paralysis, right? And you can't even get past the observation stage. So really you have to, this is where it comes back to the context of your own farm situation, right? What kind of constraints are there on you to make a decision? Do you have time to infinitely analyze every last little bit of information? Or is there a constraint? And I would argue that you should set constraints on yourself. I need to make a decision within this week, so you're going to take the information into account, and you're not going to go past the week and keep collecting more and more. Well, there's a USDA report at the beginning of the month, so I'll wait till then. Oh, there's a Statistics Canada report at the end of the month, so I'll wait till then. No, it never ends. It never ends. So you have to set some constraints, and that is relative to your own personal situation. And that situation might be those non-price constraints, storage, time, like bills becoming due. Do you provide, what areas on a farm do you think farmers could use the loop to make better decisions? Well, primarily, so my area of expertise is grain marketing, right? So naturally, I believe that is the kind of the easiest way to engage with the OODA Loop. But you can think of any other scenario. Let me give an example. Buying equipment, for instance. Like, okay, well, do we need to add another combine, or can we get away with using a grain dryer instead? And that'll allow us to have a larger harvest window, and we can purchase a grain dryer rather than a combine, right? Okay, well, observe, right? What region of the country am I in? Am I in the west, the east, right? What are the weather patterns? These are things that instinctually we might know, but until you actually get them down on paper, that observation is sometimes you can skip steps, remember. So, okay, what part of the country am I in? What kind of the weather patterns? What crops am I growing? Okay, well, it appears that we do need to make a decision. We need to either buy a combine or we get a grain dryer, maybe both. Now you're going to orient yourself. What's the farm situation? Do we have the financial capacity to do that? Do we got to borrow money to do that? Do we have to sell grain to do that? Orient your farm situation. Who's going to run that combine? Who's going to run the dryer? What kind of training do we need? Okay, we've now oriented ourselves, and we said, okay, yeah, we meet all the criteria. We're gonna make a decision, and then that decision is the 5-step process. What's our goal? Well, we want to get harvest done quicker. Okay, what does success look like? What does failure look like? Are we willing to risk to achieve that goal? And then finally, what's plan B if something doesn't work out? Oh, combine doesn't arrive. What's plan B? It's back-ordered. And then finally, the action part of it. Who's going to act? Is it going to be my son that's going to go into the John Deere dealership? Or the dryer, or the grain dryer seller? So I just kind of made that one up on the spot. But I think that that's an example of how you can use it in an equipment purchasing or an expansion part of your operation as well. Do you need to apply the OODA Loop to the decisions that are to be made in the act stage? How, who, and when? Do you need to apply the OODA Loop to the decisions that are to be made in the act stage? How, who, or when? It's a good question. Do you kind of like do another iteration of the loop in the how stage? I think so. I think as this becomes more of a habit in your everyday life, you start to do this instinctually, right? Just like brushing your teeth. And so the observation, and remember, this came from the military, right? So the idea was you're making decisions in like 30, 40-second time frames. And so yes, I do believe that you can use the OODA Loop. I will tell you though, I am not that skilled. And so I won't say it's easy, right? It takes practice to go through this rational decision-making framework, but I do believe you can use it in the short-term decisions within the actual loop itself. What sort of reading would you recommend if you were looking to learn more about rational decision-making? That's a good question. Oh, we've got a suggestion right there. What was that? ISO-PROSO framework. Okay. I can't give you a book right now. I spent a lot of time reading some of the papers. So John Boyd, the developer of the OODA Loop, he didn't write a book. He wrote a lot of papers for military colleges. And so if you go on the internet and search John Boyd, military college papers, you'll find several of them that you can use. And presentations. He's got presentations too that he gave back in the 10, 20 years ago. So John Boyd is the fellow that made this. Search him up and you'll find some reading material. Getting through the O's can be easy with the farm family. So the orient and observe. Getting the decision making is the largest hurdle. Is there another system to achieve this? Yes, there is. I probably won't go through it today. The 5-step decision-making process for grain marketing works really well. I think we've had some other presenters here. Kelly Dobson, for sure, is somebody that I hold in high regard. Elaine Fraze. There's definitely people that work on the decision-making element of it. And we work on it too, I just can't do it in 45 minutes. So. Does Cargill use the OODA Loop to make decisions outside of marketing? I'm not aware that Cargill, as a broader organization, is necessarily using the OODA Loop. Nobody's brought it to my attention. That's something that we're using at Marketsense, kind of in our consulting program. But I'm not sure if it wouldn't surprise me if they were using it, but I'm not aware of it. Do you provide farmers with training and courses on how to use the OODA Loop themselves? Yeah, so would learning be more organic through your advisory services? So both of those are true. We do what's called a think tank event. So we bring all our clients in and we go around Western Canada and we kind of provide training. OODA Loop is one of those seminars in the past, but definitely it takes practice. It's not something you can just get in a 45-minute seminar. So it takes practice with an advisor to get to that point. I like this tool. It's simple. It's fun to say, and too often it's easy to skip steps, especially when it comes to acting. Yeah, I agree. It's a simple framework, and I would challenge you to use it as soon as you leave here today and see how it works for you. And if it works, keep doing it. Thank you.